Today we're going to paint a pine tree or a couple of pine trees step by step, and I'll talk you through it. So let's get started. Normally when I do these videos, I do them speeded up. And what I'm going to do this time is have it mostly in normal time, and then there will be times when I speed it up. So let's start out in normal time because I really want to talk through this slowly. Because my hope is when you get to the end of this video, you'll see the picture of trees that I worked from and that you'll screen capture it and paint your own trees and then send them to me and I'll tell you how great they are. Because I'm a big fan of other people's paintings. So what am I doing here? What I'm doing here is using the value finder to look at the colors that I'm mixing up. I need some mediums and I need some darks and I also need some lights. So what I'm doing on the side, I'm not taking this much time to look at the values. I'm putting that there for you. There we go. All right. So you can see I have darks, mediums, and lights. The Viridian is my green. That's the only green I have on my palette. And then I have ultramarine blue next to it, and I've added some Viridian to it. Then I've used Aurelian with a tiny bit of Viridian in it, and finally some Naples yellow, which probably was tipped with a little bit of Viridian as well. So the first thing I do is say to myself, do I have darks, mediums, and lights? Yes, I do. Do I like them? Because these are the colors that are going to end up in my painting. So if I don't like them, this would be the time to not use them. But I like these colors. Meanwhile, what I've done is just taken some watered down Naples yellow and put it in the spots that I know that I don't want to touch. There's some lighter spots that I know that I don't want to have anything to do with, and I don't use masking fluid. I use this instead. All right, and then of course I dried it with the hair dryer, and now I'm getting pretty ready to go. What I've done is I have those test dabs there. I'm satisfied with them, and so I'm mixing more of that paint over on the palette, the exact same colors, but more of it. And one of the clues is sort of like always mix more paint than you think you need, because the paper, I use 140-pound weight Arches paper, and it's a bit of a sponge. It will really soak up paint. I don't know what happens on something like Yupo, which is a much more smooth surface, and I've used it maybe once or twice, and for me it's like painting on glass. It doesn't really absorb, but this paper really will. So watercolor is deceptive. You always think you have more than you do. I decided that I didn't have a dark. Those are equally dark, but I wanted to have two choices of dark. Boy, they're very similar, but one has a little bit of indigo on it. That's the one that I put below. All right, now I'm ready to work. Now what I do, what seems to be different than lots of watercolor painters, is I put in my darks first. I look for my dark patterns because that's what's going to unify the painting. I'm using a number 10 flat brush here, and it's loaded with paint. And the paint is sort of thick, about the consistency of, I would say, milk or almost on the verge of gravy. So this is just putting in what I call the no-tan or underlying pattern of darks. And there are videos about that you can look at. It has to do with the design of a painting. I don't want to get too complicated here, just putting in darks. You know, I already put in the lightest lights, which were that Naples yellow that I'm going to not paint over, hopefully. And now I'm putting in the darks. So forms are already starting to happen, or you get a hint of what the forms are going to be. All right, so now let's see what happens. I'm going to take a sip of tea, and let's see what happens. So if you decide to do this along with me, then I would suggest that maybe you follow this process, or maybe you'll do the opposite because you can also work from your lightest lights to your darkest darks. All right, so now what I did was I found another green. This is mostly Viridian, and I'm putting it in next to, on top of, and near the color that I already put in as my dark. Now you might ask yourself, why is she doing that? It doesn't really look that different. Well, this is what I'm talking about when I talk about mix for color, mass for value. I usually say mass for value, mix for color. Anytime I can use two colors to accomplish one task, I'm going to do that. And you might have noticed that I didn't rub them together. I put them near each other while they're still wet, and I let them join each other. It makes, it's sort of like what more naturally happens in nature. If you All right, I won't talk about that. All right, let's go, move on. We'll move on because what we're doing is we're trying to repeat nature on a flat piece of paper with something that is basically water, and you got to somehow create that illusion. All right, I dried it, and then this is now I'm into midtones. This is a considerably lighter green than what I put in at first, so that's what I'm putting in now. Again, it's a number 10 brush, and I'm following any value shapes that I see on those trees. Now, in order to find value shapes, what I mean is I'm squinting and looking for any midtones I can find. The tree on the left is darker than the tree on the right, and I need to remember that. And at the very top of that tree on the right, the sun is kind of hitting the very, very top. Now, I picked this photograph also because it's not a great photograph. I mean, it's okay, but it's not great. And that means that it's up to interpretation. You might decide to paint these trees with a lot more red in them. You might decide to paint these trees with a lot more blue in them, or gray, or whatever you decide to do. And I thought that was kind of neat because it's almost like a black and white photograph. So you can decide, or even do a color value swap out. You can make the trees purple if you want to. The point is to find dark shapes, medium shapes, and light shapes, and to apply paint in this sort of generous way. All right, so what's happening here? I have my darks in, I have my mediums, and my lights I've left, because remember I put that Naples yellow in at the very, very beginning, and I'm not going to touch it. Although, I have to admit, I did a little bit later on. But that's part of the process too. All right, this is what I really wanted to talk about. What's happening here? All right, normally in a shadow underneath an object, I would use some alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue, and I would thin them out and I would make a wash. But I put an X there because that's not going to work. Or it would work, but it's not my best choice. Why is it not my best choice? It's not my best choice because I haven't used any red in this painting yet. And I haven't used any pure ultramarine blue in this painting yet. So I thought, okay, in order to make a shadow that's going to go well, it doesn't look like it just was thought up out of the sky, I need to be consistent with the colors I've already chosen. What have I used a lot of? And I thought, well, you've used a lot of Viridian, you've used a lot of ultramarine blue, and also a little bit, and I didn't share this, but I did have a little bit of that alizarin crimson going on, just a slight touch. So I thought, well, that's what the shadow is going to be then. So although that shadow looks blue, what it really is first it was the ultramarine blue, watered down. Here comes the Viridian, watered down, and then I put in some color spots of value, which is going to be the red. Now that's a classic use of a triad, using 3 colors, not rubbing them together, leaving them on their own, and creating an overall value shape with those 3 colors. And it is a triad of the, what do you call it? Primary colors, right? Primary colors, because you have red, green, and blue. Wait a minute. Green isn't a primary. Right. But it is 3 colors. All right, now in typical watercolor fashion, what's going to happen here is you turn your paper upside down. I mean, I think this is what watercolor people do. I don't know. It's certainly what I do. Wet all around the trees, but not a lot of wet, damp, because if you make it too wet, then water's just going to fall off the paper. And now I have to decide what I'm going to do about the sky. Well, the sky, I noticed from the photograph, and this is often the case, the sky is lighter where it meets the ground and darker when it gets higher up in the sky. So in order to be consistent with that snow, I have a little bit of alizarin crimson and a little bit of that Naples yellow that I'm putting in that almost reads as a neutral. And now I'm going to put in a light wash of that ultramarine blue. So I'm being just as consistent with the sky as I was with the snow, and also with the forms of the tree, because I've used these colors throughout the painting so far. Nothing's going to get introduced that hasn't been used before. I'm not going to go in and grab a cadmium yellow. I'm not going to go in and grab some orange. Nothing, or even something like cerulean blue. which is a lovely color for skies, but it wouldn't work here to my eye because I haven't used it yet. So it'd be too late to bring cerulean blue to the party. Now, just a quick trick is, because water reacts to gravity, you'll end up with a bloom or a cauliflower if you don't wipe the bottom of that paper, because the water gets kind of dammed up there, and of course then it will flow back. That's how you get one of those cauliflowers or blooms. All right, now what I'm showing is, I don't know what that was. We'll have to come back. Oh, I know what that was. That was just showing the two colors that I used in the sky. So things are looking pretty cohesive here, and it's probably about time to dry things. Yeah, time to dry things with a hairdryer because I don't have patience. Now, I left the room at this point, which I will often do because at this point I spent about 20 minutes of real time on this painting, and I find that my attention will start to wander, and if my attention starts to wander, then I don't make good decisions. So I left the room, to get a drink of water, admittedly a piece of birthday cake, it's my birthday tomorrow, and then I come back and evaluate. So there's my value, you can see my value dabs below so far. Now, what I felt was all those shapes that I put in at the very beginning weren't unifying enough. So I'm going to go back in and add to those darks. But I'm not introducing anything new. I'm just putting in another layer of a color that I already decided on. It's getting kind of late to add something new to the party. Oh, I did change brushes though. I went to a number round, a number 10 round. Yeah, number 10 round. And my reason for this is that it was feeling like, I was feeling like, your brush is too small when you start licking the paper, when you dab, 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 dab on the paper. And I was starting to do that with the number 10 brush. And I thought, I don't want to do that. I need a bigger brush. I could have picked a bigger flat, but I decided to go with a round. All right, now what's happening? What's happening here is, because I left the room, the sky is dry enough to do something more to it. And I really wanted to put in some geometric shape in the sky that would echo the shadow that's below the trees, just because I think that's a better design element. So I'm going in with an overall wash of ultramarine blue over that triad that I originally put in. And I find that pretty satisfying. I think it fits the value criterion as well. I think it matches the value. Remember, I'm not matching the colors to the photograph. That's not the goal. The goal is to match the values to the photograph. Now, this is where you start to become a designer and you start to be interpretive. Anything way behind the trees is going to be a little bit more out of focus. So I use colors that I've already used throughout the painting. They're watered down a little bit, and I'm just making some forms that indicate trees. And you might notice that that's where I will tend to put in some reds and oranges. And again, didn't go into orange. What I did was I used Naples yellow, which I've already used, and I put some alizarin crimson into it, and that creates an orange for me. I needed a context for the trees, but I wanted the trees to be the star of the show. So here's my example of using, the alizarin crimson, and then a green, which I mix from Viridian and probably Aurelian, and that gives me a neutral. Here's the screen capture, so you can capture it and paint your own trees and send them to me so I can see what you do. And here I pulled back to show you what I worked from and how I work. So you might want to set up your paper so that you have the photograph nearby and a value dab scrap to work on. There's a detail, so you can see that I did not rub colors together. I let them meet and mingle. I'm using a dry piece of paper and using the wet into wet technique, meaning letting wet paint drift into wet paint. And there's the overall finished product. And this was just a fun painting to do for the day because it's December 22nd, 2019. It's almost Christmas, so I thought, let's paint some Christmas trees together. And so remember to keep the whites of your paper white and your paints wet, mask for value, mix for color. If you have any questions, please ask me and I will answer them either in a video or with you directly in email. And I will see you next time. Okay, bye-bye.